Ladies and gentlemen, I am Yuzril and welcome to the Tribble Timewarp. Today, the 21st of October, we will be looking at the Vault Ensnared. This is the second 5-man space mission being brought in for Star Trek Online with Season 7. And plot-wise, it is pretty simple. The Tholians have gotten ambitious and have decided to steal the Vault. Yes, you heard me, they're going to steal an entire starbase. I don't know what it is about the Tholians. I can only assume one of the initiation rites into their society consists of the young bug being told to jack a shuttlecraft, and from there they just steep them further and further into kleptomania. At any rate, they were polite enough to tell the map makers that they would be nicking the vault because it's not on the map anymore. I assume it's a bug. I assume it's a bug. It might not be, who knows. It might very well be a technical glitch that they can't get round if they want to have account of a failure condition later on in the mission. The first phase of 3 consists of 10 Riemann ships fairly evenly spread around the vault itself, each of which is being attacked by a group of Tholians. All you have to do is get to each ship, destroy the Tholians attacking it, and keep the Riemanns alive through the encounter. The more ships you can save in this fashion, the more A, help you will get in Phase 3, and the more marks you will get at the end of the mission. And as we all know, marks mean reputation, and reputation means prizes. Eventually. Technically, the mission appears fairly sound. I don't see any major bugs here. Everything is where it was the last time we saw the Vault in the mission of the same name. My gripe with it is a conceptual one, that this is a straight DPS check and nothing but. Indeed, Cryptic appear to have set it quite carefully, so that the only way you can realistically clear out all 10 Riemann ships is if you basically bring 5 escorts to the party. Which is justifiable in its way, because if you make a DPS check any easier, then tactical escort captains are going to roll right over it and get bored very quickly. And in truth, this is Star Trek Online. Let's be honest here, a lot of us are running multiple starships by this point in the game's life cycle, and even new players, well, maybe not new players actually. Yeah, that could be an issue. That said, Cryptic are in this business to make a profit, and if it's in their interest to produce a mission that very definitely nudges players towards particular ships and buying extra ships in order to achieve an optimum performance, then that's entirely their right to do so. Of course, it's entirely my right to then start moaning about pay to win, but there you go. At least if you do find yourself grouped with science vessels and such like, then you can still get a degree of success. It is not a you have to succeed completely or the mission fails and you get nothing. Which I suppose is about as good a compromise as you can get when you consider the disparity between a tactical captain and an escort and just about anyone else in anything else, particularly science captains in science vessels, which are pretty much the poster boys for low DPS, high utility builds. In fairness to Cryptic, however, of course, if you're going to make a DPS check in this game, you have to calibrate it for tactical captains and escorts, because if you calibrate it for anything else, said tactical captains and escorts will come in, stomp all over it, then look around and say, okay, now where's the challenge? There really is no way to win on this one, not given the disparity between tactical DPS and, well, just about everybody else. However, I will admit to being concerned that so much of this mission is a DPS check that you're going to get people who will warp in, look at their group composition, realise that it isn't 5 escorts, say, lols, you will suck noobs, and then warp out, leaving the rest of the group in the lurch. I'd like to say it wouldn't happen, but I've seen similar behaviour in other STFs, so let's face it, it will. For those of you pointing out that this group consists of a carrier, 2 cruisers, a destroyer and a science vessel isn't optimal by any stretch of the imagination, and we still clear 6 of 10, bear in mind that we are on Tribble. By definition, the audience for Tribble tends to have A, better equipped starships, and B, tends, I don't want to seem like I'm bragging here, but tends to be slightly more skilled than the average holodeck audience, simply because we're the ones mad enough to jump onto the server and test for, well, in this case, no reward. There's been no word of anything coming for Tribble, and why should there be? We're doing ourselves a favour in the long run by helping iron out the bugs and make a better game for everybody. Phase 2 is, unfortunately, another DPS check, and more so than Phase 1, which at least had the decision to be made on how you were going to split the party up, if at all. Phase 2 has one strategy to deal with it. Just one. You'll see why in a second. The Tholians warp in a series of Vault Weavers. You can see one there. It's the little frigate-sized vessel. And it's small even for a frigate. That's practically shuttlecraft size. That is trailing a yellow strand of web behind it. Ignore all the other Tholians. They're just a distraction at this point. Those Tholians will start orbiting the vault, weaving the web as they go, and you have to stop them completing the web for 7 minutes. Technically, of course, it's more like 6.5, but there you go. Now, as far as approaches go, as far as I can tell, the game is tracking the total distance travelled by the Vault Weavers. So, if you're a science or engineering captain, things like tractor beams, gravity wells, warp plasma, and such like can be used as temporary sticking plaster methods. However, ultimately, you've got to kill the Tholians, and will you sod off? Thank you. So, as I said, it's a DPS check, pure and simple. The other reason is that you have got to split the party into essentially 5 solo elements, because the Weavers are so widely spaced that you have no alternative if you want to kill or disrupt enough of them. Now, splitting the party is fine, and it's a perfectly valid thing to force the players to do, and a decision to force them to make. And we've seen it in plenty of other missions. Khitomer Accord, the Cure, the Blockade Run, potentially the Fleet Starbase Defense requires you to split the party as well, as does the 5-man version, which is more optional if you're that way inclined. But here it gives you no choice. There is one optimum strategy and there is no room for alternatives or discussion, which leaves a bit of a taste in my mouth. It would be nice to at least say, okay, well, if you split the party, that's fine, but if you want to run 2-2-1, if you've got a couple of science vessels, and that's perfectly viable and you can do well on that as well. Again, however, the optimum is very clearly defined and very obvious. 5 escorts, 5 tactical captains, where, hey, go blow things up. So, yeah. It's a little vexing, I suppose, that Cryptic had built a mission that caters so exclusively to one class of ship and one class of captain, and the rest are, by definition, suboptimal. But, on the other hand, I suppose it was time to give tacticals their time in the sun. So, from a bug standpoint, not technical bugs as such, more like niggles. The first is that the Tholian Vault Weavers can be very hard to spot past about 30 kilometers once the web starts going up, because the yellow strands of web are surprise surprise, exactly the same colour as the yellow web itself, which is what you'd expect, but given that they're constantly tracking along established seams is a bit of a problem. It would be nice to see the pathing changed so that the Tholians were actually always weaving along non-built sections. If you follow that, it may not have been entirely grammatically correct. Closer than 20 kilometres, they are spottable. Look at the left of the screen here. You can see one that's tracking along the seam. You can also see another that's tracking along an unbuilt section. And you need to keep your eyes open, but they can be spotted. So I suppose that's what it comes down to, really, keeping your eyes open. The only technical niggle I've got that could really be said, hey, is this a bug, is the fact that you can fly through the established sections of the web. Now again, this can be hand-waved. The Tholians are spinning the web relatively loosely. They're spinning it to enclose a starbase, not a starship, so they're leaving gaps, as you can see here, more than large enough for even the biggest ship to fly through, as I've just done. However, part of me wants to look at that and say, you know what, it would be interesting if hitting the web sections added a navigational hazard. Clonk that, you take some damage and you can't get through it. On the other hand, since the Tholians are flying along the seams, I suppose you could get yourself into all kinds of line of sight bugs. Phase 2 ends with a cutscene.
The Tholians' web is collapsing. Excellent. The vault is secure, but we are not. Sensors show Tholian reinforcements approaching at high warp. Prepare for battle. Defeat the Tholian flagship if you can.
I have to note a couple of things here. First off, that cutscene still needs a lighting pass. Riemann environments, or at least what we've seen of them, tend to be relatively dark, and that was being lit by full 100-watt bulbs. So, who knows, maybe the Riemans have discovered photochromic contacts. The other thing, aside from a certain amount of admiration for the Battlestar Galactica-style shaky cam work, the camera controls have clearly come on a long way since the early days of the cutscenes, is that the cutscene itself is misleading. There are 2 Tarantula-class battleships in this final phase. One of them, the one the camera focused on, is simply a generic ship. The other is named and very quickly disappears out of frame. So what you will see happening with people who aren't familiar with this final phase is that they will tend to assume that the one with the escorts is the flagship, when in fact it isn't. The objective, as you can see, is to kill the named Tholian flagship, and I suppose it should be noted that this is only half a DPS check in this phase. All you have to do is kill the named ship within the time limit, and then you can move on and take the others out at your leisure. I should also note that the Tholian Tarantula class is actually really nice to look at, even if we're probably going to see far too many Mass Effect Reaper jokes. The Riemans have gotten their ships from Phase 1 repaired by this point, so the more ships that you save in Phase 1, the more cannon fodder you'll have in Phase 3. Obviously we're never going to tell the Riemans that to their face, but hey, that's basically what they are. I have to note, however, that it does seem as though the lowest pressure, lowest stakes phase of the mission comes at the end, what would normally be the climax. Once you've got rid of the named flagship, the rest of it is really just an in-your-own-time deal. So I have to query the pacing in that regard. Overall, what do I think of this mission? Well, it's a simple, uncomplicated 15 minutes, kill as many Tholians as you can. For a fairly average performance, 6 Riemann ships saved, the web was 60% complete and we got the optional at the end. We got 21 Romulan marks apiece. Judging by the way the inventory display flickered, I'd say 3 of those are for the flagship. My main concern, I suppose, is that Cryptic have taken what is a fairly major feature of Season 7 and they've built it around one class and one type of ship. I have a concern that that isn't going to be too good for this mission's longevity once everyone else realises that that's the case, but we'll see, and I'll see you next time.